Good afternoon. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Larrakia people and pay my respects to the past and present traditional owners. Today I'd like to just share a short story before I introduce Ben. It's a very positive story and on a project that we've worked on in the last few years. And AET Kings is part of the Travel Corporation, which is a collection of global tourism brands that supports sustainable tourism through its Conservation Foundation. And today I'd just like to share some of those learnings with you. The project that we undertook demonstrates what can be done to advance Indigenous peoples and their culture, and how the tourism experience can be enriched as travellers are seeking unique and authentic experiences, as we've heard a lot throughout the conference. The Kimberleys is a global tourism hotspot, and the project provided an opportunity to develop Indigenous-owned and managed assets, enterprises, while protecting the region's culture and natural assets. On the ground, we worked with the Kimberley Land Council as well as WWF in Australia. This picture shows a full-day cultural awareness experience. This involved the Bardi-Jari Rangers. It also involved the elders as well as tourism operators that were working in country. It is a workshop for those people working in the Kimberleys. It helps them to focus and learn and how to respect the land and the Indigenous values. Also developed under this project was a welcome workshop for visitors, and this happens daily at Coolgerman in Cape Leveque. The visitors learn about the family ties, weapons, hunting, the connections, the land, and why they do things. The Bardi-Jari model of interactions and visitors to their country has become an example for other Aboriginal groups wishing to develop their own cultural awareness products. In the 3 years that the project was undertaken, it achieved some many positive outcomes. Traditional owners gained knowledge of the tourism industry. The project built capacity for participation. The Bardi-Jari are now engaging with visitors. Tourism knowledge exchanges have been set up, and they run 2 to 3 times a year, not just on site, but they've also been run in the Tiwi Islands and also in Kakadu. Formal training through TAFE has now been introduced, and more communities have got involved and the knowledge has started to spread. One of the final project achievements has been that interpretive signage has been signed off by the elders. This is a real achievement because it's a permanent fixture that's easy to manage and communicate to visitors visiting these very important sites. This is a picture of an elder in Langi Beach on the Kimberley coast, and importantly, the knowledge is being passed down from the elders to the younger generations. The project also looked at ways to manage the Kimberley's natural habitat. It also looked at how people can continue to visit these amazing places that are truly sustainable. To really just summarise some of the outtakes, we know that international travellers are looking for unique and authentic experiences, and by enabling Indigenous participation in tourism on their country enriches the experiences for these visitors. Tourism products like the Bardi-Jari Talks now provide meaningful local jobs and build skills. These ideas are seeding and spreading, and as the process evolves, for the benefit of many other communities and the visitors. I think this is something also that's been very personally rewarding for myself. I have been involved in some of the workshops, and I truly believe that we have made a difference over the past few years in this project. And I think the project very much aligns with the theme of much that's been said in these last couple of days. So it now gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Ben Sherman. He has been a natural leader in the development of American Indian tourism efforts in the United States. Ben is a co-founder of the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association and the Native Tourism Alliance. Please give him a warm welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much.
Tammy for her introduction.
My relatives, brothers and sisters, it's good to be here. I won't take long because I realize I am keeping you from that cold beer this evening. I wanted to introduce myself a little bit first, but before I do that, I would like to, if I can find the tools of the trade here, from the Native Tourism Alliance, I would like to acknowledge something, and I've heard this done several times throughout this conference. And Marcia Smoke and I have never, ever heard this kind of acknowledgement from our people in the United States and Canada. So it's a great honor that you give, that you bestow on the indigenous people of the lands where you visit. And so myself, I too would like to acknowledge, but from the heart, with great respect and great love, from the heart, the Larrakia people of this land, the original indigenous owners of this place. And I would especially like to thank Billawara Lee, Larrakia elder, for her welcome to country. And also, I would like to thank our own personal host who guided us throughout the day on Tuesday, and I'll tell you more about that later. It was very, very special. Robert Mills. Robert, thank you. I was born and raised on an Indian reservation in the state of South Dakota. It's a Sioux reservation, although that's not what we call ourselves. We're the Lakota people, the Ogallala Lakota. And this photograph that you're looking at is a tour that we were doing for National Geographic on our homelands, the Badlands, Makoshicha in South Dakota, on the reservation. These are some of the things that are my favorite places and my favorite things to do in our lands in the United States of America, very close to the lands. We have our iconic animal, the buffalo, which ranged all the way from Canada to Mexico and from East Coast to West Coast at one time. But their numbers were reduced from some 50 or 60 million down to 500 at one point, when they almost did not survive, like the Arawak people didn't survive. And we were going to be extinct at one time as well, but somehow our people survived through colonization. I have a very large extended family in South Dakota, and this is one of my granddaughters. Her name is Shahela, and she was a little girl in this photograph. That was a few years ago. She has grown a little bit now, and she's gone out and she's found new friends, if you will. She brought this tall, skinny guy before us one day as her new friend. That's Shahela. We were fortunate to have photographs of some of our people from the 19th century, from the 1800s. And the figure in the middle, Sitting Bull. Some of you may have even heard of him. Sitting Bull traveled widely and was a very famous person, infamous with the Americans, if you will, because he fought so vigorously against the invasion, the colonization, along with people like Crazy Horse and Red Cloud and Geronimo, and we can go on and name names, but nevertheless, Sitting Bull was one of the more famous ones. And these are other people here, Lakota woman, Cheyenne people, Apache, Pawnee, Arapaho, some over 500 different tribes in the United States. And this is the way we look today if you were to go to one of our celebrations. It's called a powwow. And this powwow just ended last weekend in Denver, this same celebration. So you can see that, yes, we still retain a lot of our culture, and we still retain a lot of the practices, the performances, the dances, the songs. So the culture is alive. Beautiful people, just as you are here. And this is what our people look like today. We dress and act like anybody else in America. We live in square houses now, and we have businesses that we tend to. Our recreational practices are like a lot of other Americans. This is the homeland of what we call American Indians, Native Americans. They're called different things. Marshall's home country, they're First Nations, Aboriginal people. The United States, Alaska here, Mexico, and South America. Indigenous people from the far, far north to the far south. So let's talk about indigenous just a little bit. How many of you have seen this movie? It's very popular, the largest selling movie in the world. And the guy there is not indigenous, as you know, that saw the movie. He's been manufactured by science to be that blue guy that looks indigenous, but he's not. But the lady is indigenous. We have debated a little bit during different times of this conference about what indigenous is. So why don't we say just a little bit about it, and then we'll get past that, because it's very easy to get past it as well. We like to think of our indigenous people, and this is the way the bodies throughout the world think of indigenous people, as the original inhabitants, aboriginal, of a region with strong attachments to land, territories, water, and possessing a shared ancestry, possessing common spiritual beliefs, or very similar spiritual beliefs in knowledge of these lands that they inhabit, and following the general similar social customs, laws, and ways of life. First people in our land, we asked an artist to just imagine what may have looked like when first people entered a territory a long, long, long time ago. And this is, he picked a region just east of Denver, or west of Denver, Colorado, that is now highly inhabited. But this is what it may have looked like perhaps 10,000, 20,000 years ago, who knows. And the spirit bird brought he and his family to this area. And he is saying a prayer for gratitude. Now, indigenous people, it's been estimated that there are some 370 million indigenous people in the world. And that would make it about 5% of the world population. However, indigenous people represent, as you can see there, 80% of the world's cultural diversity. And that's different cultures, different languages, different ethnicities throughout the world. They occupy 20% of the land surface. And they live within 80% of the world's biodiversity. And so what we can safely say from that, this cultural diversity, this biodiversity, is that indigenous people are the creators, they're the stewards, they're the inhabitants of biodiversity in this world, of the greater part of the biodiversity. That's what we are, indigenous people. And the world's remaining forests, or they call them ecoregions, ecosystems, with the highest biodiversity are linked to these, and this is a word that's kind of odd here, surviving indigenous groups in the Americas. So just think what that means for a while. And what this living close to the land, spiritual beliefs, customs that are so ancient we can't measure the depth of them. It's just hard to comprehend 40 or 50,000 years, Aboriginal Australians. But these values, knowledge, and wisdom, they embrace generally the belief that the earth is a living organism. And Anna Pollock made just an excellent presentation today and almost prevented me from making mine because she did so well and said so much. But there's this kinship among all life forms that we believe in. And there's the natural wisdom. You know, and this is all from the heart, these values. This has nothing to do with technology or any kind of Western science. You might call some of it indigenous science, though. And indigenous values, universal indigenous values, and those words are embedded in the Declaration, as you saw. Knowledge and wisdom. This holistic balance in the way that we live our lives. We don't look at life as a single-dimensional pursuit. All business all the time, all church all the time, all recreation, or whatever. No, our lives are holistic. And because that's the way our ancestors were. They lived holistic lives within their natural environments. And the ecology that surrounds us is always sacred. The lands are sacred, the waters, the trees, the plants. I mean, we don't necessarily worship them as gods, but they are our kin. And we pray with them, perhaps, to a higher power, to a creator. And then we have this abiding love. And how often in the tourism business do you hear the word love? You may feel love, and I know a lot of you do. Love for your work, love for your land, love for what you do, love for the people, the natural landscapes. But how often do you hear it expressed in this professional world of tourism? Well, I'm not afraid to say that. You know, it's easy for me to express love for the land, love for the people, and love for the trees. Yes, I'm a tree hugger. Indigenous brothers and sisters throughout the world. And let me take a moment here just to find out who you are. I told you who I am, and I got my little list here of the attendants, and I want to see if anybody is still here from some of these places. So if you would, when I call your country or your home name, would you please stand up and we'll acknowledge you. From Papua New Guinea, is anybody left here? Please stand. Thank you. Thailand. We had a registration from Thailand. You don't look quite indigenous to me. But at one time, your ancestors were indigenous to somewhere. And you can probably still connect if you tried real hard. Okay, Bhutan. Anybody from Bhutan still here? There he is. Philippines. Anybody from the Philippines here? Somebody was registered. Okay. Fiji. There. In there. Okay, Indonesia. Indonesians? No? They were here. Oh. Welcome. Samoa. Right here. Solomon Islands. All right, my brothers. Let's see. India. Any brothers or sisters from India? I know someone was registered. Nepal. Where's our brother from Nepal? There he is, right there. United States. Oh, that's me. Thank you, Marcia, for reminding me. Canada. Indigenous from Canada. Oh! New Zealand. Okay, did I leave anybody out? Vanuatu. Where are you? All right, good. Torres Strait Islanders. Where are you? All right, very good. Brothers and sisters. Now, did I leave anybody out? Africa. Oh, yes, South Africa. Okay. All right, I did leave a few people out, didn't I? Some of you didn't stand up yet. Australia. Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's good to see you all here, and I tried to shake everybody's hand that I possibly could, especially my indigenous brothers and sisters. I may have missed some of you. I apologize, but I may catch you this evening. But some people thought I was running for political office. I was shaking so many hands at the beginning of the conference. Okay, Aboriginal. Different names, still indigenous. The Sami, as a part of our group that founded the World Indigenous Tourism Alliance, we have a Sami group. Maasai, I'm sure that we will soon be connected with the Maasai. I know some people over there. And this guy is just a wonderful guide, probably the best guide in Kenya. And then there are the uncontacted indigenous people, those that have very little contact with what we call civilization. And we're worried about these people. These are in Peru and Bolivia right here that I have on the screen. And we're worried that they are going to be invaded very soon, probably by Brazil. Peru is a little bit more sympathetic, but I have an idea that Brazil will invade them. They've had some contact because there's a metal pot there that they got from somewhere, but I'm not even sure that these people have a name yet. I'm sure somebody has named them, but we don't know what their name is because they've not been contacted. But they will be distressed before too long, I guarantee you. Indigenous people, always part of Mother Earth's web of life, always have that feeling for the earth, and perhaps for the sun, the sky, the universe. And as with Mother Earth, indigenous people are often in trouble. Witness the sad story that Marcia told about the Arawak and the islands in the Caribbean. They're extinct. They committed suicide as a people because they didn't want to undergo the invasion. Indigenous people are extremely vulnerable to external disturbances. They're called a miner's canary, if you know what that means. Just watch the indigenous people. All the ecological disturbances that are occurring today, many indigenous people are on the sharp edge of those disturbances because they live closer to the land. They live in more fragile conditions, more fragile circumstances. They obviously suffering from loss of language and culture. Very sad. And most are marginalized and depressed, repressed and oppressed in some way or another. Constantly losing ancestral lands and territories. Even though we had treaties in the United States, sacred agreements with the United States government, we still continue to lose lots of land through the decades in various ways. And then assimilating with other cultures, especially the dominant culture, which eventually diminishes the indigenous populations. And then there's the problem that we have of access to our sacred places. And this is one of the most sacred places, at least in the United States, with many, many tribes having gone to pray and conduct ceremonies at this place in the past. We call it Mato Tipila, but the United States government, in its great wisdom, chose to call it Devil's Tower, when it's actually the most sacred place that we have. But we cannot do our prayers and ceremonies there anymore. The government stole it from the indigenous people, and they admitted stealing it. And it was stolen in the year 1877, right after Crazy Horse was murdered. They took the Black Hills, and they took Mato Tipila from our people. And so we sued them in court. And in 1980, the courts, federal courts, made a final decision. They couldn't award the land back, but they made a monetary award. And it amounted to paying for this land at the 1877 land prices. So we refused to accept the money. And we are very poor people on my reservation. But we refused to accept the money, and it has, since that time, it has sat in the United States Treasury, and it has built up to about $1 billion US, but we will still not accept the money because we need our sacred places. We need access. But here's part of the problem, and you'll recognize this, you people here in Australia. People climb this big rock. And although the government half-heartedly tried to help us at least diminish the climbing, they have not been successful. They were sued in court by the climbing people, and the government backed down. So now when we go up there, we see these people climbing our sacred mountain, and when they're up there, they spend all day, so they defecate and they urinate on our sacred mountain. And they just pretty much thumb their noses at us. Let me say a little bit about my ancestry here, because it's relevant to what I'm going to talk about. This is Luther Standing Bear, one of my ancestral grandfathers. He was born in the 1800s, and as a young man he hunted buffalo. But as you can see, he eventually joined the other side. He became educated, and he wrote some books. And as an older man, which you see there, he did a lot of speaking and performing. And these are some of his words. And this is going to tell you about our people, which is not too dissimilar from a lot of other native people in the United States and in Canada. He wrote about this unifying life force that he recognized from his earliest teachings that flows through everything, all of the natural world, including not only the living objects, and of the inanimate objects too. The rock is sacred to us as well. The same force was breathed into the first man, and it's still breathed into people. And that means that everything in this world is kindred, in the words of Luther Standing Bear. Everything is related. And he wrote that just before he died in the 1930s. And so our people, the Lakota, have a belief in one God, a creator. And that creator is called Waka Tanka, the Great Spirit, or the Great Mystery even. We don't acknowledge that, we acknowledge that we don't know everything about that creator. So the term also means the Great Mystery. But again, this creator has developed a unifying life force in this universe where all things are related. And when I come up at the beginning and I said my relatives, I really meant it. And that's why I did this from my heart. You're my relatives. We have a concept in our beliefs called Wolakota. And what that means is that it's a state of keeping everything in balance. We talk about holistic balance that indigenous people try to practice in the modern world. We don't always succeed, but it's the proper state of all things. And many indigenous tribes have these beliefs and customs where they try to keep everything in a state of well-being, what we call Wolakota. And when you do that, everything works right. Support the health and the well-being of yourself, the individual, your people, tribe, nation, or whatever it is, and the natural world. And everything flows properly and continuously when you do that. You see, this is natural wisdom, traditional knowledge and wisdom that teaches that. And Anna told you this morning, that we are far, far from any kind of a natural state in this world of well-being. in many different ways. This generosity is a value. Giving when no one is looking. That's the best kind of giving, when no one is watching. The Haida potlatch, the Haida people of Canada and the United States, the Lakota, called the Otuha, where people gain honor for themselves and their families, not through accumulating stuff if they're successful in their endeavors, but through giving it all away. The more you give, the more honor you show for yourself and your family, and those that you give to, you honor as well. So the potlatch, one is honored with great gifts, but those gifts in a very short time go back to the community. And there's another word for this that I'll show you in just a little bit. But the indigenous tourism now, we're back to tourism, should be and will be, and we hope will be, founded on these values and principles that we're talking about. Indigenous tourism should come from the heart. And we all know that. But too often we get hung up in the business aspects of it, and that's kind of the environment that I come from, just like you, Mike. And I know business coming and going myself, and I've started and failed more businesses. I've worked in the corporate world. I've worked at Cape Kennedy on launch programs, and I've done all that stuff. But I always come back to finding ways that I can practice these values, these traditional values and principles. John, we want to be more than background color and motion. We want to be a lot more than that. We want to be able to influence this ecological balance in the world. And we want to do it through tourism. What better vehicle to reach out throughout the world and interface with people, organizations, individuals, the traveling public, corporations, and get the message out about this tourism from the heart. And seek ways to adopt these ethics and these values and these principles into what I call mainstream attitude. But Butch is quick to remind me that in New Zealand, the Maori values are quickly becoming the mainstream values. Incorporate these excellent concepts, useful concepts of indigenous wisdom into conservation programs for climate change, environmental improvement, and all that. There are paths to this ecological balance that must be taken, and they must include the indigenous input. And that includes what we talked about as well. Protecting indigenous rights, lands, knowledge, and finding and heeding the source of indigenous knowledge in your communities, in your region, in your urban areas, wherever you might find it, seek it out. And then use that wisdom to help restore and conserve the ecological world. So very simply, and some of you have heard these words before, I try to reduce them down just to some very simple terms here and advise that you adopt, practice, and promote these universal tourism values. And it's very, very easy to say, and it's very easy to do. Everything that you do should be built on this foundation of what I call universal tourism values. And it has to do with this concept of kinship with everything. You are my brothers and sisters. I'm related to the tree out there. We're related to the birds and the things that swim, the fish. And then there's this concept of reciprocity. Every day of our lives, we accept the gifts of the earth without thinking too much about them, I guess, for the most part. But we rarely return those gifts on a daily basis. We get to where we take them for granted. We take breathing for granted when we shouldn't. Drinking water for granted. Eating food. Those are gifts of the earth. And This concept of reciprocity means that when a gift is given to you, that I mentioned in the Haida Potlatch and the Lakota Otuha, those gifts must be returned, sometimes more times than what you received. It's called reciprocity. And the concept of the bee and the flower, I guess, is the easiest way to describe that relationship. The scientists call it a symbiotic relationship. The flower can't live without the bee. The bee can't live without the flower. Reciprocity in its very simplest form. 3 more values, universal tourism values. Reverence. Don't be afraid to apply some reverence to Mother Earth. One of our worst offenders, by the way, and I don't want to offend anybody, but this is a fact, are the Christian churches. They have drifted away from their obligation to care for the natural world. And how often do you hear sermons and programs by churches that talk about these kinds of values, about this kinship concept? And then empathy, compassion for each other, for the indigenous people who are in distress, for the earth that is in distress. And then love. Again, love. Back to love. And with those, I think that this Larakia Declaration, embracing these kind of values, can be a much better success than if you just follow the words in the Declaration. Take them forward with these feelings of love and empathy and kinship, and you will be much more successful in your pursuits. Everybody can listen from the heart. Anybody and everybody. So that's the core of my message to you. And of course, Butch can articulate this much better than I do, but look at how well the Maori values are being adopted on a national level. What's to prevent other countries from doing the same? I mean, they have proved that it works, otherwise they wouldn't do it, right, Butch? Indigenous values. And Anna, again, this is something that you mentioned. Through the past couple of decades, people are becoming more and more aware of the need. They're becoming more and more conscious of the need to get back to some basics. And these are very basic values, human values. And so develop your tour products with this in mind, no matter what your tour business might be. Back to the United Nations Declaration, this is the way it should read, on the rights of indigenous people. Every country in the world is signed up to this, and it has some pieces in there that are extremely relevant to what we're talking about. So if you're working as an advocate in this business for this kind of tourism, keep a copy of this declaration handy. It's got a few dozen articles in it, and it applies to all indigenous people in the world now, about indigenous rights, which also affect conservation practices on the lands that they live on. Assistance programs for indigenous people. So there's a lot to that. Now, you saw this on the screen. This is what we were debating about. But what we're looking for is for indigenous people to build bridges to corporations, government agencies, and to the traveling public, and build those relationships on the foundation of these values that we talked about, if you would. And this declaration, this conference, is an example of some groups coming together to initiate the building of those bridges. And we were pleased and honored to participate in the conference under those circumstances. Okay, now here is the wrap-up I want to tell you about. The establishment of the World Indigenous Tourism Alliance. It was established on Tuesday. And we started the day with Robert Mills. And oh, it was a wonderful start. He took us to the water. He washed us. He prayed. He blessed us on sacred Larakia land, sacred Larakia water. And so we started the day exactly right. And then Robert took us to the lands out there, away from the city, and there we deliberated all day long, embraced by Robert and his extended family and friends and elders, and with Robert always present. And they spoke to us, they fed us, they entertained us. All the while, we were working on plans to develop this World Indigenous Tourism Alliance. So we were really blessed with the opportunity to do that. And I think it's extremely appropriate that we call the declaration for this conference the Larakia Declaration. And we want to make sure that anywhere we go with our alliance, we acknowledge the respect that we were shown by Robert and his extended family, and that we did it in the right way, with our feet on their land, with our seats on your land, and we established this thing that's going to have a great impact throughout the world. I would like to have the members of our little mob stand up so that you can recognize them. I think you've probably seen most of them around the conference here. There's our spokesperson up there, who you all know, Neville. And Waytalk, Johnny Edmonds, the CEO. And he has, Waytalk has agreed to host this alliance for the indefinite future. We've not quite figured out how long it's going to be, but we're grateful for that, Neville and Johnny. And the rest of our mob, if you would stand up here, please. Butch, you too. Come on. And of course, Robert, stand up, please. Thank you. Oh, there's that pretty face. We've made a press release. It's gone throughout the world already. In fact, Tuesday night, we didn't hesitate. Johnny got on the computer and made the press release, and Neville's photograph showed up in 82 different countries on Wednesday morning. So, I just want to finish by saying thank you very much. Wopila Tonka. Big thanks, John King. ATEC, PATA, Tourism NT, and all the sponsoring organizations, thank you very much. And if I may pause for just a moment. I have one final little thing to do. And Robert, with your permission, I would just like to say very quickly a short prayer of respect and reverence. And all it does is ask our Creator to accept an offering. And we usually take something that is natural to the earth, in this case tobacco, and we say, Tukashla wa kantaka, Uchimaka, le iachbiayo. Grandfather, Great Spirit, Grandmother Earth, receive my offering. Oh, Midakasi, we are all related. Thank you.